Today, I wanted to speak very candidly about a common experience for neurodivergent children. And I think this is really important because this highlights why I do what I do. So I'm going to share some of my own personal experiences just because I fit into this common pattern. So slight trigger warning. I won't be sharing too much. But anyways, before we dive in, if you're new to Glow Within, my name's Katie Connolly. I'm a registered clinical counselor, craniosacral therapist, founder of a registered children's yoga school, and mom to two. So obviously I'm very passionate about the work that I do. I've been at this and working in this area for over 15 years now. And this is where my passion comes from. So in studies that I've read over the last year or so, between 20 to 35% of ADHD and autistic and ADHD children experience eating disorders. So anorexia, bulimia, and other variations. And I think this is really important because the way we support our children through this is different if they're neurodivergent. The root causes can also be very different, but that is something that more people are just starting to realize. And so, yeah, the whole care, the whole system of support around it needs to be honored and needs to be looked at quite differently. And before we even dive into that and why there's such a high percentage of neurodivergent children, youth who do experience eating disorders, I'd like to go back to some of those root causes. So, and again, maybe this is where you can relate. I've shared this many times before. I'm not sure if I've shared it on YouTube, but neurodivergent children are also disproportionately say victims of abuse. And so there's a greater propensity for them to have experienced trauma. Trauma is subjective. So what may be trauma to one person may not be traumatic to another. That's important to remember, but also honoring that trauma is trauma. An experience that has been too much, too fast, too soon, or unwanted for anyone is the same for anyone. And so while we tend to call trauma little t, so that could be those like chronic traumas, or like the system is overwhelmed every day. And then the big T traumas being a car accident or something more severe. The body ends up responding similarly. So when we experience trauma, and with that little t trauma, it can be lots of things, and there's the one thing that sort of breaks the camel's back. And when we look at burnout, it's sort of similar. Burnout isn't one particular thing. It's what we kind of often attribute it to is that one thing that maybe broke the camel's back, but there's a whole slew of things that happened before that, to include some subconscious patterning, etc. So it's really important to really look at it from a big picture, holistic perspective, because when we're able to, then we're able to really, one, honor the individual's experience and be able to build in supports that honor them. So when we experience trauma, we end up in a more sympathetic or activated nervous system state. We also see shame. And so that shame ends up turning on ourselves, right? We start to reject ourselves. We start to feel unworthy. And for children, this can happen really young, as it did for me. And so the way that I dealt with it was eating disorders. I didn't consciously choose like, oh, I'm going to like choose an eating disorder. That's not quite how it works, but we find a coping mechanism, and that happened to be mine. And so I share this because regardless of what the coping mechanism is, I think it's important to understand why I do the somatic work that I do. So many people look at somatic work and they think, oh, it's healing work. And it is. It's really very holistic, very powerful healing work because, again, we're working with the body, the subconscious mind, and even the conscious mind, and really putting everything together. But where my focus has been, and this is why I have my registered children's yoga school and started a long time ago, but the reason that I do this work is to be proactive. So the somatic practices that we share with our children, the tools that I share here on my channel are not just for healing. They can be for healing, but let's get in front of that. Let's teach our children the tools so that when they do maybe have an experience, ideally just a little t trauma, they're able to seek help. They're able to understand, oh, this doesn't feel right in my body. Something's off. Maybe they can't put words to it, but maybe they're able to describe it in a different way or able to share with a parent through movement or in a different form of expression, as I've shared. Because somatic work isn't straightforward with anybody really, but definitely not with the neurodivergent community. We need to be a little more creative, which I love. So helping our children to understand their bodies, right? This is why I help parents to understand their bodies and their systems so that they can then be that model and share it with their children. And so when we're able to help our children understand what's going on in their body, ideally we can help them to advocate or find the support that they need. So proactive somatic practices are really, really important because those then become part of their toolkit. And I grew up with some of these tools during my years between 10 and really 25. It was hard for me to connect to those tools. I guess about around 22, after my near-death experience, I started to reconnect because I needed to reconnect with my body to come back. But I already had those tools in my toolkit, so it was relatively easy for me to help myself out of these patterns that had disconnected me from my body. So if I didn't have those, I honestly don't know where I'd be. But again, even if our children aren't able to draw on them in the moment, the fact that we've planted those seeds, the fact that they have those tools to potentially draw on is huge. I was able to, again, my situation might be a little unique, but I was able to really heal myself. It would have probably been much faster had I found the right person to support me. I wasn't able to. Anyways, having these tools is really, really powerful. So I encourage you, if you want, check out my near-death experience story if you want a little more as to why I do what I do. But I encourage you to take a peek at some of the tools that I offer here. There's a wide range of ways that we can approach somatic practices for anybody, as I've shared. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, leave a comment. I'm more than happy to support you. And this is the beginning, right? So planting those seeds, modeling it ourselves as parents goes much further than you might imagine. So keep it up.